crisis but don't know how? With our app, you can send climate reviews to organizations and leaders. Our team reaches out to the organization to encourage dialogue. Just download We Don't Have Time. Tap the green Create button and choose Type of Review. Give climate love to people doing great stuff. Create a climate idea to suggest a solution. Or send a climate warning to those who hurt the planet. To increase your impact, you can share the review, because when enough people agree with you, organizations and leaders will change. Many even want your opinion, because we have to work together. Do you want to be part of the solution?
Travel has changed. We were forced into taking a hiatus, which left us wondering, do we really want to go back to how things were? Belching out tons of carbon dioxide as you open your world. All the ads in your face and the pressure piled on for you to book now. No thanks. But there is a better way to travel, a greener and cleaner way to bring the world within reach. If you really want to wake up happy, book your hotels on Goodwings. You'll never see an ad and we'll never pressure you to book. And when you book your hotel on Goodwings, we'll offset the carbon emissions from your entire trip for free. Yep, hotels, cars, trains, and even your flight. All neutralized, compensated, offset, whatever you want to call it. It's gone. The icing on the cake? Create a free profile and you'll get member rates on a whole world of hotels. And if you're a company, you can save even more money with Goodwings for Business. So what's not to like? No ads, no stress, money saved, and carbon-neutral trips. Yes, travel has changed, but it's about time it did.
Welcome to the global headquarters of the Goodvertising agency, aka today just called The Couch. These are serious and unprecedented times, so really no need for fluff or graphics. My name is Thomas Kolster and I'm the founder and the director at the Goodvertising agency, and we work in the exciting intersection between impact, sustainability and marketing. And we have done that for more than a decade, serving global clients from organizations, not profits, to governments. We've also kickstarted a movement in advertising towards a more responsible direction. You can check that out at goodvertising.info, and we hope you want to join. We are ourselves also catalysts for change and run tons of educational programs that you can obviously learn much more about. And my role today is basically just moderating this exciting panel debate, so can't wait to see you online in a bit. So see ya.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the live version of Thomas Kolster. And as I said, I'm the founder of the Goodvertising agency, and I'm super happy to moderate this exciting discussion about the question, is this the end of travel? So how do you see the future of travel? And I gotta admit, I'm a travel buff. I've been to about 70 odd countries, from the small islands off the coast of Central Africa to Chile to lots of other places. So personally, I'm really excited to this, looking forward to this debate about the future possibilities and obstacle we will face as travelers, and for those of you who are joining us today from the travel industry. And I'm especially excited to kind of find the answer today about how can we reinvent travel in a greener, cleaner, and maybe even more fair way. And no doubt about it, I mean, we're all calling in from our homes, so the impact of COVID-19 is having quite an impact on the travel industry. But obviously what isn't clear is how that will impact the environment and how that will look in the future. But I do think in so many ways that the pandemic is also an opportunity to take a new look at travel and to maybe reinvent the travel industry instead of just replicating the mistakes of the past. So that's why we're here, really to ask those important questions. So is this really the end of travel? And how does the industry need to change? And maybe also importantly, and you can ask yourself that question, how do you need to change? And you can be part of this exciting conversation. So we want to hear from you. I know that quite a few of you have already asked your questions on Facebook, Twitter, or on this live stream. So please keep doing that, because I will pick up some of those questions in the conversations with our exciting panelists. So I can't wait to introduce you to our 4 panelists here today. And in so many ways, they are all innovators. They're all optimists in their own way, from design thinkers to people rallying the masses to an inventor of a new travel platform. So let's begin with the first panelist, calling in from Sweden today. It's Ingmar Rentzhog, and he's the CEO and founder of the climate action-focused social network We Don't Have Time. You ought to go and check that out. An amazing platform. Also, a big welcome to Sudhanshu, and he's an associate professor of innovation of Copenhagen Business School, and also the founder of iVation Consulting. And then all the way from Holland, we have Simone Van Neerven. She's the founder of reBel.la, and she's a catalyst for innovation. And she brings a lot of airline insight to this little panel, because she is the former head of innovation at the low-budget airline Fueling Airlines out of Spain. And last but not least, welcome to Christian Møller-Holst, and he's calling in from Denmark, not too far from where I'm at, actually. And he's the CEO and founder of the sustainable hotel booking site, Goodwings. So welcome to all of you. Great. So let's kick off this conversation. I think it's just fair to start with Christian, because Christian, you are one of those who bring a specific travel insight into this. So obviously, what are some of the impacts that we're seeing on the travel industry? And obviously also, I'm curious to know about this whole conversation we're hearing about all the positive environmental impact of people traveling less by airplanes. I mean, we heard stories about dolphins in the canals of Venice. So Christian, what's the state of the planet of traveling?
Thank you, Thomas. If we look at on the data that's coming in on an industry level, IATA, the International Aviation Organization, indicates that the possible COVID-19 impact on passenger traffic for the full year of 2020, so it's an estimate, could be that we will see a reduction in seats offered by airlines of more than 50%, a reduction in passenger numbers of up to 3 billion, and a loss of $400 billion in gross passenger operating revenues. That's on the industry level. If we look at our own business, we went from double-digit monthly growth rates to dystopia in April, and basically have very little business today. If we then look at the climate, so as you mentioned, Thomas, we are seeing examples of less smog in Paris, fish in the canals of Venice, and so on. I read about a study from the Australian Institute that indicates that the fall of airline emissions could be up to 40%. So why is it not more, as no one is traveling by plane these days? Well, it's because a lot of the planes are still flying, empty or half empty. But of course, we see a radical improvement in certain areas of the environment and climate. But honestly, I fear that we're going to see a massive bounce back to what we came from. And that's why we've taken this downtime to really take this as an opportunity and innovate. So as I mentioned earlier, we've had no business for the last 5 months. And instead of going crazy, we've really tried to find the best in ourselves. And then, kudos to my entire team and investors. And not more than 2 weeks ago, we came out with our new offer, which is that as of now and going forward, we will be focusing all our efforts on climate. And what it means in practical terms is that we're going to offset the emissions of our clients full trip. So transportation, flight, car, train, bus, your hotel, your transfers, cabs, taxis, even your burger. So we calculate it, we pay for offsetting, and we do what we can. Yeah.
Great. And I mean, for those of you who don't know Goodwings.com, obviously some of you saw the little video, but please go and check out a new way of traveling when we bounce back to travel. Ingmar, I mean, I know that you're someone who looks at travel in a different light, because obviously a lot of travel these days had been traditionally with airlines, and we know that obviously it's not just about an industry that needs to change, but also we as individuals need to change. And we had a conversation about how you actually haven't flown for quite some time. So maybe you can shine a light on that. And I know this is one of the reoccurring questions that we're getting on the chat at the moment as well. Trains. So what's your perspective on airlines, train, and the pivot of some of these new, or not new, but other transportation options we can choose?
Thanks, Thomas. Actually, I haven't flown since I launched We Don't Have Time 3 years ago myself. And the reason for that is that traveling by airplane is by far something that emits so much carbon emission compared to everything else that you can do as an individual. So if you take your own emission budget, you will see that taking away travel by airplanes will cut your budget in half or even more. So that is the reason why I don't fly. I would love to fly the day you can do it without a lot of emission, like electric, etc. And actually, I think that if more people do like I am doing, airlines will hurry up and they will fix that, because if there is a demand, they will adapt. So that's the reason why I don't fly. And it's a challenging thing, of course. It's not so challenging to go on vacation, because you could do shorter trips, and more or less the whole Europe is accessible through train travel. But in order to do business on an international level, I even have board members that I have never met in the USA, because I can't fly there and meet them. So we don't have time as an organization. We have been using those digital tools long before the whole world did it, long before the corona. Actually, in 2018, we hosted the world's first digital conference, and nowadays for climate, and nowadays everyone is doing that. So I mean, change is happening very, very fast.
Yeah, I think I mean, we're all now online doing a meeting, and I think definitely the change with business travel, more with seeing, but obviously traveling isn't just for us in the more fortunate part of the world. Obviously, mass tourism is changing rapidly, and I know, Sudhanshu, that you have talked a lot about how obviously the developing world is picking up airline travel, and how that might impact things going forward. And I think this is a kind of very important point to bring into this conversation, so we don't look at it from a, the privilege that all of us have of traveling to what's happening in other parts of the world. Maybe you want to give your perspective on that.
Sure. I think there are 2 or 3 ways to look at this. The first way is that we can continue doing business as usual with a higher demand for sophistication. So if folks want to travel, they will demand a level of sophistication that didn't exist before. That's one way. That is, the more developed, the more advanced countries, the more advanced consumers, or the more sophisticated consumers. Then you also have the emerging economies that are now just beginning to want to be curious about the rest of the world. Like in the 60s and the 70s, the advanced economies, we were very curious about the rest of the world, and we traveled. Now, those people the emerging economies, as the population gets richer, they will get curious about Denmark, about Sweden, about Holland. They'll want to go in the boats in the canals in Amsterdam. They'll want to do the funny things that you do in Venice and kiss under the bridge, for God alone. These are all aspirational experiences that right now or before, folks were just watching on their movies or their screens, Hollywood films. Now they actually can do it. So for those, you still will have budget travelers. You will still have large pack them and travel kind of airlines. But in the third wave, the more conscientious developing country people with a little more of disposable income, who have already traveled before Corona, they would probably demand a more sophisticated, not as sophisticated as the developed country folks, but a little more sophisticated than the mass. So I think, like Christian says, that it will come back. I think it'll come back. Human habit is very difficult to change. And some of us who are more, who have a greater amount of disposable income, we would tend to demand more sophistication. All this is only possible with a much better business model. I think we have not seen the power of business model being delivered to actually address climate change yet. We're looking at climate change as a technology issue. I think we should try and understand that business models actually can have a huge impact with the existing technology on climate change, and that we are not exploring yet. And we need to start to open up the box, and we need to see how business model can actually help in reducing carbon emission. And we need to explore that. We've only looked at the technology bias, and I understand that there's pollution and there's a technology solution, but business models has a very important solution avenue as well.
So very interesting point of view to not being stuck with what currently is and the technology that currently is, so the pivots, whether it's electric trains or electric flights or whatever it might be. I mean, Simone, obviously you have, through the job you have today and obviously your former job at Head of Innovation at Vueling, I know that you have had some interesting discussions with your colleagues around, obviously, how can a low budget airline navigate in this space. So, any hints on where the airline industry is at? Because it does seem like what Sudhanshu is saying right now is that we're probably not going to see the end of airline traveling in any day soon.
No, so before I joined Vueling, I have worked for KLM for 17 years, so I know a little bit about the airline industry. And it's interesting to have the perspective both from low cost, but also from the legacy airlines. Well, what I try to do is I try to change from within. So I think already we discussed about changing behavior. I also think systems should be changed. So I don't know if people know, but every fuel is being taxed except for kerosene. So there's sort of the flying industry is sort of subsidized. So I always try to open up the eyes of the CEOs I work for and say, this will end, right? So this cannot continue and this will end sooner rather than later. And then thirdly, about the business model, stepping into Sudhanshu, what you were saying is, I try to ask provoking questions because I think when you're head of innovation, you should also think about the future. So I made the CEO of Vueling Airlines always very uncomfortable when I asked him the question, are we still an airline in 10 years from now? And especially when you look at a company like Vueling, they only fly European flights. So there are already pretty good train connections. So why are we not thinking about that? And what I used to do is when I had to go to Madrid, from Barcelona to Madrid, I took the train, but I was not allowed to do so. They told me, you work for an airline, so you have to take a flight. And I said, no, I do research. I need to research why people are taking the train. But I think this kind of thinking, like you are working in an airline, so you are not allowed to take the train, and it is so much more convenient. I live in Amsterdam right now. I also have a client in Paris. I always take the train. And I also like to explore why people are doing that. And maybe another funny anecdote to share. It's not easy to work in an airline industry because the mindset is not always very open. So this first couple of months when I was working in Vueling, I said to them, I have a crazy idea. We should partner with a company like Zoom or someone who is offering this kind of online conferencing stuff, right? Because it's a new business model. And everybody was like, she's like really crazy. Why did we hire her? Imagine if they would have done that, right? They would have been world news, and they could have pivoted to a complete new world and business. So I think a lot of mindset changing needs to happen in the airline industry.
I think that was exactly also the point that you made, Sudhanshu. I mean, if we look at the stock value right now of online conferencing like Zoom, that's going pretty well. I mean, we do have a very practical question coming in here, and I think it's whoever want to answer that, and it's thank you, Samuel Plumbo, for asking that on Facebook, and I'll encourage all of you to keep asking questions to our panel, and we'll pick them up as we go along. But the question I want to ask, and feel free to answer this, whoever want to answer it, is how do you think the shift towards traveling by train will continue after the pandemic? And I think this is probably the more pivotal part of the question. What could be done to further strengthen train traveling as the go-to choice for sustainable traveling in Europe? So obviously we're focusing on Europe right now, but what can be done? It is difficult to change behaviors, but what can be done to get more people into trains? Yes, Ingmar?
Yeah, I would say I've done a lot of train travel through Europe, and it's not always that enjoyable. Sometimes it works out very, very well, but it's how the different countries within the European Union is cooperating is really terrible, and it's a jungle out there. And the number one reason why many people I know still travel Europe not by train is actually that it's so hard to book the train tickets. In order for me to go to Zurich, I had to hire a manual person to just book my tickets, and it was so much work with those ticket booking. And if you want to buy a airplane ticket, you just go to a site and you have the ticket in your hand and you have all the options. So I think someone to do this, like where you can book a travel and you can see the train alternatives on the same site as you book your plane ticket, that would be awesome.
I think, if I may barge in.
Yes, please go ahead, Sudhanshu. Please
okay.
Go ahead.
I think if you look at India, it is a little more advanced than Europe in terms of trains. So we don't have the same problem that you have said, that the booking is a challenge and so on and so forth. A large number of travel journeys in India still are by train. So the airline industry is not really competing with the train. The train has simply no competition. I mean, you have almost 20,000 trains running every day. You have almost close to 20 million people traveling by train. My figures may be plus minus 5 million up or down. So it's the airline industry cannot or has not yet been able to be a credible competitor to the trains in India as of yet. However, things are changing, and I think that the train system in India is huge, it's vast, and it's also very cumbersome. They have made it much better, but still it takes a lot of time. And I think for those of us who are time sensitive, it can be an issue.
Yeah, and I think that might actually bring us just quickly to the business traveler and this notion of changing business models. And obviously, one of the things that I at least have seen across the world at the moment, obviously with online conferencing, is this idea of, do we actually really need to get in that airplane to go to London, or go underneath the tunnel in a train to have that meeting? So that's changing. So Christian, obviously a big part of Goodwings customers are business travelers. Also, you have leisure travelers as well. But do you see this as something? Is this a habit that's going to stick? Are we going to be used to this reality where we're talking to each other through a screen, or what is your views on that?
I hope so. I hope that we can, and I also congratulated one of the larger Danish companies earlier this week on LinkedIn, announcing that they would cut down, I think it was Covi, the engineering company, cut down 50% of air travel for internal meetings, and 25% on air travel for external, for client meetings. I think we need to cut down on our emissions. Technologies, Zoom calls is one thing, but it's a different experience to sit in a two-dimensional meeting as we do now than to be together physically. That can bring something else to it. But we need to be more, we need to think about, the footprint that we have as we get into those airplanes, and be more cautious and conscious in our everyday work, in business and in our private life. But just coming back to what Ingmar said earlier, I think for me it's all about infrastructure and convenience. Because if it was easier, I think we could nudge many more people to go down that way, to not only go by train but also by bus, which also has a very low emission per passenger. Cost is also important. I mean, it's ridiculous that it costs 3 times as much to go from one end of Denmark to the other by train than if you find the right plane ticket. And the third, I think, for me, is education. Now that we've pivoted towards climate only, and with our full trip carbon offsetting offer on Goodwings, we also have this calculator. I don't know if you tried it, Thomas, but when you find your hotel, and just before you go to check out, we do the calculation of your entire trip. And we've been getting a lot of feedback on our Facebook channel from people saying they weren't aware that bus, for instance, had that lower footprint. Or if we carpool, if we share that car to Berlin from Copenhagen to that meeting, instead of driving in 2 or 4 cars, that actually lowers the emissions per passenger significantly. So I think there's a lot of information and education, convenience, and cost. It's the 3 good old elements.
Obviously, and it's a good point. Obviously, it's not just the industry that needs to change, but obviously we have a big responsibility in pivoting this. Before I think we move on to discussing things like mass tourism and some of the economic and social impacts of what we're facing right now, we do have a question from Mario. So thank you, Mario, for asking this question at wedonothavetime.org. And Mario has a very interesting question. Again, feel free to answer this, whoever feels more equipped. So what do you think will be the main trends and emerging technology to come to the forefront of rail over the next 24 months? So what are some of the alternatives we'll be seeing within the next 2 years? So anybody have an interesting take on that?
I think that the business models will infiltrate rail travel. So companies would want to combine experience with business, and if for example the train travelers or the train companies want to provide an experience while they are having the business meeting, or after, at the same time, or one after the other, I think it would be interesting to have. Then rail could be an interesting option. But the combining business models, for me, is a cheaper way than to try and invent a whole new set of technology again.
Well, on the other hand, to add to that, I think one of the problems is why people are taking a flight instead of a train is time. People think it takes longer. It's not always like that. So that's also need to be educated, right? So, but on the other hand, you see the development of technology to come up with faster trains. So I know they're testing a lot with Hyperloop or Hyperloop kind of technologies. I think we can learn a lot from China here. China is booming on the super fast trains, the bullet trains. So actually, I hope they will come to Europe more, although I think infrastructure in Europe is pretty difficult. So, but that is what I will see in the next, referring to the question, in the next 24 months, a lot of money put in this kind of development.
And I think we kind of come back a little bit to this behavior and obviously things that are typical for whatever way we look at sustainability and lowering our carbon emissions ourselves and our behaviors. So, I mean, when we coined the panelists as the end of travel, I mean, a fair question to be asking is maybe, do we actually need to travel so much? I mean, we've seen the effects of mass travel. I mean, Simone, you'll be representing Amsterdam today. I mean, there's been so many tourists flocking into Amsterdam. I know that one of the things that the city of Amsterdam was actually saying, no more tourism campaigns because we don't want them. So coming from, if we just remember back to beginning of March, mass tourism was beginning to be a major issue in cities, in countries, saying enough is enough. And Christian, you had a point about mass tourism, or we might rebound back to at least at some point the same levels of tourism. But do we actually need to kind of look in the mirror and say to ourselves, should we maybe stop all that traveling altogether? What is your take on that?
I'd love to answer the question, but let me start another place. I think I think the world is seeing it right now that we need to travel. The world economy is interconnected, it's globalized, and we are interdependent, and we need to get business back, but we need to get it back smarter than pre-COVID. Remember that 1 in 10 employees around the world works within travel and tourism, Thomas. So it's more than 300 million people whose livelihood is dependent on restaurants, hotels, airlines, etc. And it's very easy for us to sit here and say, well, let's shut it down for one more year, and let's see the canals in Venice then. So, I mean, we have to balance people and planet. But so I think we need to travel. Also, we live in a time of extreme isolationism, and nationalism. So, from a more philosophical point of view, I think we've never had a bigger need to meet each other across borders, exchange ideas and business. But so that's my point of view. We need to travel, but we need to do it better, and that means that we should, of course, avoid to go to Barcelona or Madrid or Copenhagen, for that matter, when it's peaking. And as I told you, Thomas, we've been playing with this idea of having this tourism density index on our website. So if you look for a hotel in Barcelona in July, we might come up with a pop-up and saying, well, consider Bilbao or Sevilla. Secondly, I think destinations is also worth talking about. Why do I need to go to the Maldives, with my family, when I can get just as fantastic travel experiences within Europe? So I think we need to be very cautious about the demand that we build for ourselves, and I think the travel companies need to be much more bold and not be so relying on the hotel deals that they've been, clinging on to in the Maldives for 20 years. Well, maybe it's time to find some equal nice hotels in Corsica. So I think it's on, yeah.
So Ingmar, I actually just want your comment on this, because obviously, which is an incredible journey you've been on We Don't Have Time, and actually connecting people around climate change without the traveling. So you actually connected a lot of like-minded people around a cause they care about. So can we, if we take the cultural dimension of this, can we connect people? Do we need to travel to connect? Is that so important?
Yes and no. I would say to connect in business, we don't need to travel as much as we did before, because a lot of time when we travel in business is just a waste. And if we're going to run efficient business, we don't want to waste time. And more and more businesses also looking over their emissions, and so they want to be more efficient and less emitting companies. So I think we're going to see a huge different behavior in business travel. Of course, we're going to still travel in business, but it's going to change. I think it's going to be much more quality and much less those fast like train, like where you fly over the day and back to a meaningless meeting. That's one thing. But I will also say that what travel is so great to make is the random connections, where you meet people you never had anything to do with. And in the society we are today, I'm really terrified about the development of that. We only read newspaper we agree on. We only in our social media bubble that we agree on. We also buy services from companies we agree on, and we don't talk to each other. And I think the remedy to that is travel. And the best remedy to that is slow travel, because when you travel slow on train, you meet people and you talk to people. So I think travel is super important, but slow travel is the thing we need to achieve, because slow travel will also be really good for the climate.
Great, and yes, and obviously, and I think it was a fair point, and as you mentioned as well, Christian, the economic implications of travel. Actually, I always, I remember this dilemma between cars versus bicycles, cars versus public transportation. That the conversation we had around cities, and one of the guys I always respected a lot was the old mayor of Bogota, Enrique Peñalosa, who talked about, people on a $30 bicycle has the same, or should have the same rights as a guy in a $30,000 car. So this idea of travel, and Sudhanshu, you touched on it a little bit in terms of people who can afford to choose a certain type of travel, a more conscious type of travel. But what do we do? And is it a right for everyone to travel? So how can the masses going forward travel in a more conscious way? I mean, any insights on that?
I think there are two parts to this whole traveling discourse. One part is the movement of body from place A to place B and the experience associated with it. The other part we have not touched yet, and that is the idea of oneself to be more reflective, more responsible, more deeper about choices, about being a better person, more transformative person, having transformational impact. So I'm shifting the focus a little bit from just external mechanisms to more me as a responsible person, as a responsible consumer, as a person who instead of, there is no need for us to own 20 pairs of jeans. 5 jeans is good enough. And the additional 15 pairs that we would otherwise have bought in the old ways can be maybe the resources of those 15 can be shared with the rest of the people who have not yet come online of modernity. So we share, we don't need to have 20 suits. We have 5. The other 15 suits can be shared with other people who have just coming online to modernity. Even they would like to have a fancy suit. They can only afford one, but at least they would have aspirational comfort. So I'm more reflecting about what kind of a consumer should I be? How can I transform the marketplace with my own reflective demand. And if I am a reflective, demanding person, how will the companies respond to me? That aspect, I think we need to explore and unfold a little more.
And I think there's no doubt that has definitely been changing in the more wealthy part of the world, obviously with younger people prioritizing things like experiences and self-actualizations. It's much more about that little exciting farm stay where you can make pasta with a big old Italian mama and try things like that. So the individual responsibility, and I think this was something that also sparked your journey, Christian, back in the days when you founded Goodwings, I guess, in terms of looking at the impact you could do as an individual traveler.
Yes. The reason I raised my hand earlier was because Sudhanshu triggered something in me when he talked about the rise of or the development of sharing. I think what if we ask ourselves what came out of the last crisis that travel was in, that the entire economy was in, the financial crisis of 2008, what came out of that was Airbnb and a lot of other companies that were using existing goods and creating value from it. And I think, one comment that kind of taps into both the sharing element, but also the consciousness, is that I think Airbnb and Uber were both founded because, on an idea of a greater good. Let's create value out of an existing good. The problem is the lack of consciousness in those two companies when they're designing the companies, on an operational level. Uber promoting their drivers to lease cars, it's ridiculous, which basically means that we're producing more cars. The idea was, or the potential was the opposite. Airbnb driving up, rental prices in cities, excluding students to be able to live in cities, and the rise against those platforms by ordinary people. So I think the reason, to come back to your question, Thomas, the reason that we founded Goodwings, my founder and I 5 years ago, was that we saw an industry that was completely not innovative, not moving itself. I'm talking about the big online travel platforms. And the reason was that every time we asked them, why are you not meeting this demand for a new way of traveling, a green way of traveling? Well, people don't want to pay extra, and we can't afford it. And the reason they can't afford it is that they are really not travel companies. They're just advertising engines. Our competitors are spending $55 billion every year on AdWords, TV commercials, outdoor placements. $55 billion that creates no value to anyone. Let's share that. So that was the reason that we started Goodwings, Thomas, about let's find a way of reaching conscious business leaders, conscious travelers, and conscious individuals who wants to travel in a new way. And let's use that money for a greater good. And I hope that we won't get corrupted like the previous fantastic companies that, in my opinion, are just not realizing their societal potential.
I think that's a great point. And again, I'll just encourage everybody who's viewing right now, obviously, ask your questions to the panel on whatever platform you're watching this on, so we can get some of your insights and some of your questions. I mean, no doubt about that. That things need to be changing, and we've talked a lot about the individual responsibility. We talked about some of the social issues, some of the economic implications. A lot of countries, a big part of their economies actually stems from obviously tourism. So if each one of you could maybe share or think about one piece of advice that you think going forward, if we had to reinvent travel, if we had to shake that little bucket and say, what is one thing we can do tomorrow? Because obviously it's nice to talk about speed trains and 700 km an hour and all that stuff, but practically, I mean, let's hope that things go back to normal. What are some of the things that I can do if I want to be a more conscious traveler?
Okay, I'll go first. I think that there are three ways we can move forward. One, the way we organize our company. So how do we design organizations? Right now, we are still mentally in an industrial mindset. So that means we have large mammoth organizations with huge headquarters, with centralized decision-making. So when people have to take important decisions, they have to go to these mammoth places, right? So organizational design that is pivotal in driving economic growth, all right, and demand for business travel and so on. So that we need to rethink. We need to rethink organizational design in such a way that we make the organization more network, more flexible, closer to the consumer, with less centralized decision making, so people don't have to travel to headquarters anymore. They can take decisions in their local areas and move very quickly. That's one way. The other way is, as Christian says, education. And we have to look at education not so much as do's and don'ts, but we have to look at education more in terms of limiting ourselves to not consuming more than I have to.
I think those were two very good points. And I think we actually touched on the decentralization aspect as well in terms of peak travel. I mean, are there other places, obviously, we can travel to more rather than us going to the same hotels, etc.? I mean, Simone, I'm absolutely certain that these are questions you have asked yourself a lot through your work. So any good tips that you can share? I know one of the things that I saw, actually, I don't know if you were at KLM at the time, but I think there was something they announced about a year ago where they actually came out and said, you know, we will actually encourage our customers to take the train whenever possible. It really does not make much sense to take a flight from Amsterdam to London. So at least that's a thing that KLM did at that point. But any good hints that we can take with us going forward?
Yeah, that's the first step what an airline could do. I think, I don't know if you know this Spanish word, but I wish that there are more CEOs with more cojones.
Who's gonna translate that?
Because we talk.
Exactly.
Google it, right? No, but what I mean with that is yes, we as individuals can change and reframe the way we think and work. And I just wrote down, maybe we should reframe the work from home situation and then make it the work from the train situation. So we reframe slow travel. It's actually just working. So that is what we can do as an individual. But I also think that the people who have a lot of power in the airline industry should reframe what they are in for, right? So maybe reframe their purpose. It's not about transporting people from airport A to B. I think it's about having or bringing meaningful connections and experiences. And if you reframe your business like that, it opens up the whole market for completely different business models. So I think that is the first step what should happen in the airline industry. And I hope that there will be some outsiders who are going to push forward. And then some airlines won't survive. But sometimes you need a shakeout, right? So it's hard to say, but I think that needs to happen as well.
It does seem like very rarely the much needed innovation within business models very rarely come from the industry itself. There was a follow-up question from the chat from Kusol, so thank you for asking us that on YouTube Live. And the question is obviously to you, Simone, because the consequences obviously of what we are seeing right now with the airline industry, we have a lot of airlines that are being bailed out by governments across Europe and across the world. But your message to obviously, which is the tough one, balancing sustainability and employment. So, what to do with the travel industry's workforce in general? I mean,
yeah. So here in Amsterdam, I don't know where everybody is in which country, but what you see happening here is KLM is struggling, obviously. So you see people from the healthcare industry asking for those people who are cabin attendants because they are very people oriented and they can bring service. So you can see shifts happening for that. Sometimes industries need a shake-up and people will survive, right? They find new purposes. So I'm not afraid that that people won't find new or other kind of jobs. You see in airline industries, there are a lot of data-oriented people working already. There is a lot of potential for those people. Well, pilots, I know I don't make myself very popular in the airline industry, but there are already technologies where pilots are not needed to fly a plane anymore. So if I would be a pilot, I would already think about reshifting my career. So I don't know where it will go to, but I think everybody will be able to have new landing spots in other industries.
And I guess we are definitely doing digitalization, etc., seeing lots of new jobs being created and new green jobs being created. So obviously that's a good thing to think about. I mean, but let's go and look at some of those kind of practical advice that we can take going forward in terms of travel. Christian, do you want to share some of your insights, because obviously you have been at the forefront of trying to understand when people need to travel, at least carbon offset. But I mean, what are some of your points?
Well, coming back to some of the things that I addressed earlier, I think traveling is such a big part of our identity. We love to show pictures of ourselves and with our friends or families, exotic places. We love to show on LinkedIn that I'm now going to New York for this important business trip. So I think it's on a very fundamental level. I think travel is just one way of showing who we are. So I think coming back to what Sudhanshu talked about earlier about an increased level of consciousness, I think we really need to rediscover ourselves. Do we really need to travel 100 days? A lot of people I know are traveling 80, 100 days a year away from their families. Do we really need to go and take our kids to the Maldives, the example that I gave earlier, or could we have an equal fantastic experience with our loved ones closer to our home? So I think it's about being more reflective, but also from the industry to be better at opening people's eyes, educating them about the climate aspects of traveling and offsetting whatever we can, and inspire. We need inspiration. We need to be inspired what to do.
I think those are definitely very, very good questions. And talking about changing the status of traveling, I mean, I remember, when you look at a film like Pulp Fiction and they're sitting in a car in a restaurant because the car was cool. Today, when you go into a cafe, in quite a few cafes, you have a bicycle now hanging on the wall as the status symbol. So maybe we got to change the status of the airplane being the cool thing to finding, or maybe rejuvenating the train with a bit of coolness. And obviously inspiring people to see new choices. Ingmar, obviously you're amazing collective of thinkers and doers that we don't have time. I'm sure that they converse a lot about travel, and you definitely changed your habits quite a bit. Do you have one or two advices that you think would bring us in a more conscious direction?
Yes, I will say skip the boring business travel if it's not super necessary. But on the free time, I will encourage everyone to travel more, to get out there and spread and inspire climate action. Talk to people in other countries, in other cities, in other people with other political views, etc. Meet them, talk to them, inspire them, to do the right choices and inspire them that it's better choices. I think it's super important that we must move on from this. We should not go travel by airplanes, or we should not get kids because it's too crowded on this planet. I would say the other way around. Focus on what to do. Travel by train. Choose the best hotels that are climate friendly. And if you live a climate friendly lifestyle, have many kids and raise them to eco warriors to change this world. Because we can't change anything by doing nothing. We must focus on what to do and inspire others to do it instead. And so get out there, travel, and start a revolution, a sustainable revolution in travel, and spread the message. That's my advice.
That is definitely heard, and I think when we talk about traveling, I think isn't that by the end of the day about experiences, and maybe some of us need to experience things like a train, things like going into the woods of Sweden or Chile or wherever people are calling in from today. The last very last 4 minutes that we have, and thank you all for joining us here today. Obviously, we got to answer that question we put out in the very beginning. Is this the end of travel? So a very short one-sentence answer from each of you until we reach those last 4 minutes. So who want to go first? Simone?
I can go first.
Oh, okay. Christian will go first.
And I'll do it very short. I really hope it is the end of travel as we knew it. And I hope that we will be reflective, we'll be conscious going forward. We will travel, as Ingmar said, but we will do it when we need to. And we'll find the best and greenest ways of traveling. So our own desires are not conflicting with the need of the planet, because we need to cut emissions. We need to offset the emissions that we cannot avoid.
I hope we will embrace virtual travel and see that as travel as well, and that VR will be developing, evolving much more, so that the experience will be super interesting, so that you are also virtually traveling while staying at home. So,
I don't think travel would change. I think it'll become bigger. But the nature of travel would change. So the people would still travel, but I think they will travel more for pleasure. My sense is that the business people would cut back, but the pleasure people, because we need other human beings to survive. I need to be in Holland because the Dutch are very friendly and happy. I need to go on the Dutch canal. I'm so sorry. I need to go and watch see the art that is there in Holland. I can't see it anywhere else. But what I'm trying to say is that human experience is, if human experience is the core to travel, then I think it is worth having that. But if travel is only about making more money, then I'm not so sure we should have more of that.
Great, and Ingmar, the closing remarks to all the eco warriors and for those who are joining the eco warrior, the conscious revolution. Any final words?
I would say like this. I think I hope, like Christian, that this will be the end of unsustainable travel and the start of a whole other greener and much more thoughtful travel, and only do it when it's necessary, not do it just because. But I will also say that, I mean, of course we want to meet other people and we need to live, etc. But as Corona's taught us, is that if we act too late, we have to shut down the whole society. And if we're going to act too late on the climate crisis, it is the end of travel. Actually, it's probably the end of civilization. And we must take that in consideration and actually not go back to the business as usual, but change. And if we don't do it voluntarily, we need to do it we need, I mean, we're going to see regulation. It's not going to be allowed to do unsustainable travel. So we must change before someone's changing everything for us.
And those were the very last closing words here. You know, this is definitely the time to act and use this opportunity post-corona to change our travel habits, to rethink the industry, to rethink the business models. And one word I heard from all of you again and again was actually hope. So let's go into this period post-corona with a lot of hope and optimism that we can all do it as individuals, as citizens, as the travel industry. Thank you, Sudhanshu. Thank you, Ingmar. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Christian, for all these great insights. Thank you to all of you out there for your amazing question. It's been a pleasure. And we hope to see you at another conversation around travel. So thank you all.